you're watching Talking Europe on France 24. Now, as summer rolls into Europe, we're taking a moment to stop and look back on the whirlwind that has been the last few months as the coronavirus pandemic swept into this continent. Now, it's been a tough time for everyone. Around the world, hundreds of thousands of people have died. Millions have been infected with the virus and survived, but many with varying degrees of after effects. Health systems have been tested, medical staff and other essential workers finding themselves on the front line of a battle they hadn't been expecting, and for which many governments were not adequately prepared. Businesses, schools, daily life have all been upended, and throughout it all, we've been speaking to some of the people making decisions for Europe. So let's take a look back, starting with some of Europe's leaders on their initial responses to the pandemic itself. First off, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
Well, we all have to learn our lessons from the crisis and the question of resilience of our healthcare sectors. I think for the national level, there has to be a deep look into the healthcare systems. But on the European level, there are two things which are important. The first one, we have to improve the robust data reporting and the evaluation of the global data we receive on a pandemic or potential pandemic, an outbreak of a virus. And the second is that we've now made sure that on the European level, we're able to buy and stockpile the essential medical goods, like, for example, personal protective equipment like masks and gloves or ventilators. We were not able to do that at the beginning because the structures were not in place. So we fixed that. And I think over time, after the crisis, we really have to go in depth. What are the lessons we've learned? What do we have to change?
If there had been no lockdown, we would have faced a much worse situation in terms of health, in terms of numbers of people infected, in terms also of people dying from this disease. And we can see it where the lockdown has been not so severe. The numbers of people who have died from the virus have been quite important. So I think it was a harsh measure, but it was unfortunately an indispensable one.
No one was prepared for the crisis. I think we need to be fully aware of that and acknowledge that fact. We have all been swept away by a tsunami of unprecedented size, and it's affecting all of us. So what is so important is that we can deal with the issue, and there's only one word to get out of this mess. It's solidarity.
Solidarity, a word we have heard a lot about since the spring, but something that has sometimes been questioned. One area where solidarity and European cooperation completely fell apart, for a time at least, was on the issue of borders. States that had had no controls on their borders for years, suddenly closing them, causing practical chaos, not least in landlocked Luxembourg. Well, that's where I spoke to Prime Minister Xavier Bettel.
We are surrounded by borders, so we have Germany, France and Belgium around us, and the tree closed the borders. The tree closed the borders. So we were, in fact, locked down in our own country.
Did that surprise you, annoy you, that your European neighbours
the fact is
gave such disregard?
I think it was the wrong answer. To say that we close borders is a psychological answer that you give to persons to tell them, now we block the borders and with the barrier we are going to stop the virus, which is a stupid answer because the virus, never a barrier, never a border stopped the virus. But the most important thing was to this impression that Schengen could given up like this and just because of a virus. And I think this is a mistake.
Without Schengen, there is no European Union at sight. Schengen is by far the most appreciated asset of the whole European Union experience ever. So it is of the essence that people have the confidence that we have a horizon in which free movement will be restored, of course, with all the conditions to provide public health safety.
When our discussion now is of opening borders, that it's much more critical how people behave than whether the border is open or not. So it is much more critical and important that people who live in a country or go into another country, that doesn't matter. Keep the distance, put a face mask, keep the hand hygiene, stay at home when they have symptoms. That is what is really the decisive factor. So it depends on everybody, every single individual.
From very early on, there has been talk of how to recover, first and foremost in terms, of course, of slowing the deadly progress of the virus itself, and then on patching up battered European economies. Here's Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign policy chief, again stressing the need for international cooperation, something that is getting tested as talk turns to financial solidarity.
There is a great deal of coordination that is required. That's why we say it is a global problem, and we can't recover if countries are all doing it on their own. We need a coordination on a global level. The mechanisms for multilateral coordination are not strong enough to deal with a problem of this scale.
We have to put into place all the precautions, all the measures which will prevent us from having such a second wave. What is important is now to take the right measures and to start the economy. This is happening now, and I think we have good arguments, and the situation is improving in most of our member states. So I think we have now to build on that.
The European Union recommending that US travellers are not yet allowed to come into the EU unless they're resident here. Were you surprised at that decision?
Not at all. In fact, I'd had conversations with various officials in the European Union about when and when we're going to open our borders. The real issue is safety. Make sure that Europeans are safe and make sure that Americans are safe. And currently, the Europeans are further along on the disease track, if you will, than the United States is right now. I'm sure that there will be more exceptions to the rule, more travel back and forth, but on an exception basis for a while until the disease gets under control in the US.
It is absolutely obnoxious, absolutely unacceptable that some member states do take the blow for trying to repair the damage of the coronavirus crisis, because this is nobody's fault. There are no culprits here. They're only victims of the coronavirus crisis. So every effort has to be supported by the European Union in all.
It's not a question to pay for somebody else. It's to pay to safeguard, first, the internal market, to pay for the stability, economic stability, but at the second stage, maybe also political stability in Europe, to pay for the stability of the Eurozone. That's what is at stake. And if we threaten the internal market, well, everybody will be a loser, and especially those who are the big exporters in Europe. And the big exporters might be also those who might pay a bit more, but at the end, they are also the beneficiaries of the internal market and the beneficiary of stability, economic stability in Europe.
Well, while arguments are likely to continue over who is to pay how much for the recovery, some in Europe are waving a flag to warn of new dangers, including from criminals looking to exploit all the disruption. Take a listen first to the EU's Home Affairs Commissioner, Ylva Johansson, who I spoke to in late May.
In a situation now that we probably go into the deepest ever economic crisis that the European Union has been into. That's why we are putting this huge budget forward with the new proposal for the recovery. But it's also important in these times to be very aware of corruption, be very aware of the risk of mafia-type organization trying to get into the ordinary economy. So also the crisis can produce new kind of criminal activities.
We are convinced that the criminal organizations will try to make profit out of the pandemic long after the pandemic. The economic downturn, they will make use of it. Criminal organizations will look for vulnerable people to offer financial services that are not regulated. They will try to misuse public funding, because we will have big recovery plans on national and on European level, and the criminal organizations will try to invest their money in sectors that are vulnerable now. They will buy houses because through their real estate they will try to gain power.
Well, what we've seen is that the corona pandemic is a huge stress test for the European Union member states in the health sector and in the economic sector. But we've always also seen that after a bumpy start, there was a huge visibility of solidarity. I recall the French helping Italy and Spain, patients from France going to Germany or Austria for treatment, Bulgarians sending masks in other parts of the European Union, Polish doctors, Romanian doctors going to Italy and help, just to name some examples. And the same is for the economic part. We all know that only by standing together, we're going to get strong out of this crisis.
Well, like you, we at France 24 are in this for the long haul. We will keep questioning decision makers about their progress in overcoming all aspects of the pandemic in the months to come. For now, though, thanks very much for watching Talking Europe on France 24.